Howdy. Guess we always have to start off with the buttons. Why are you so sad and down today? Huh? Not even gonna give me a reaction. And we of course got the Chloe. So, today we have a lot of stuff to open here and ship off, so I thought I'd rather just grab the camera while we work, and had a patron actually order a ton of these Lord of the Rings, what are they called? These things called scene boxes? And asked me if I'd break them down. This is something that if you're a nice patron, I will definitely break these down. Plus, I think Talon's like, we want these size boxes. We think these are always something that we are looking for, because this is like the perfect size box to ship stuff off. So anyway, we have a big order for Lord of the Rings. I think Lord of the Rings, especially there's scene boosters and basically Commander that are left for Lord of the Rings. I do not know if there's going to be any sort of reprint for Lord of the Rings. If I was Wizards of the Coast, I just let it be done. That's something I'm going to address in this video. I'll just going to kind of go over some of the comments in the last few videos and go over them one by one. I know my video got a lot of flack with that I just don't get Universes Beyond and how it's so collectible. And there was a lot of theories being floated around that it's semi-reserve list because IPs expire and then Wizards of the Coast can't reprint them. I think that is probably one of the worst takes out there, because let's just theorycraft this for a bit. Let's say Lord of the Rings. You honestly don't think the Wizards of the Coast will go down this road again and do a Lord of the Rings 2.0? Or there's already theories being floated around that some of these UB, like the Spider-Man gift bundle, isn't even 1000% confirmed because it's called the Fantasy Bundle. If, I can start seeing crossovers where they put Final Fantasy and Spider-Man, and we still don't know. It's still a theory of how long they have this IP for. 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And just the amount of printing of what Lord of the Rings got in its full, 2 years plus that it's been out, is just, the amount is huge for this set, that I think is going to be a long time before the market begins to recover from just as I say, the only thing that's really worth anything on Lord of the Rings is Orcish Bowmasters and the One Ring. And the One Ring, those were both utility-based more than they were collectible-based. And there was that initial rush from Lord of the Rings for collectible cards, especially, the Soul Rings and people chasing the One Ring. That was the main thing. But at the very first, there was cards that people had, Lord of the Rings fans wanted to collect just for the nostalgia factor of, having one of their favorite fantasy books now in Magic form. But what I'm saying too, not only do I think the Wizards of the Coast could easily, if they think it's profitable, repurchase the IP for another wave in the future, but these cards are not it's not a semi-reserve list. Wizards of the Coast has already stated that they want to eventually print these cards, especially the ones that with any sort of demand utility based from Commander, in Magic frames. We saw that happen with the Walking Dead cards. And if you think that cards, just because they have a skin, are going to hold value, I think you're joking yourself. Now, is there a multiplier for skins? Absolutely. We see that in Final Fantasy. If you look at Atraxa, the Sephiroth version is more expensive. If you just compare apples to apples, we're not saying the Atraxa serialized card versus the Sephiroth. Well, what I'm talking about is the basically the showcase versus the showcase. The Sephiroth has a 2x, 3x kind of skin factor over Atraxa. Now again, there are so many more Atraxa versions out there that might also have a bit of a factor of why the Atraxa version is cheaper than the Sephiroth. But if you think that Atraxa, which will inevitably be reprinted again in the future, let's say that it is just such a mainstay in Commander and maybe it hits Pioneer and people just want Atraxa / Sephiroth for, I played with it in a ton of decks. It was very popular in the format in the domain strategies. I think it's still used in domain strategies in Pioneer. We'll just say going down the road, it becomes a $50 card. And Wizards of the Coast sees that and they decide to put it in their little, what do they even call that slot now that they put in? They start with Allies of Thunder Junction, the kind of the showdown slot or the specialty slot. They put Atraxa in that set. You really are telling me you don't think that the Sephiroth version will take a hit because of a reprint of a functional card? And that's what I'm saying. I get it. There are multipliers for sure for scarce cards with, going back to the Jace video, the Bloomburrow Jace, which is very, very rare, only came in collector boosters, was extremely rare. In the scope of cards out there, it's on par with the Kamigawa neon foils. There aren't a lot of them out there, and that is it's got a very nostalgic card. It's got a set that everyone really seemed to kind of vibe with, and that's kind of the reason why that Jace from that particular set has such a massive multiplier. But again, if there is another specialty Jace printed, you better believe it'll either stabilize or even affect the price going for that card. So the people that I think that are you know, these UB skin base, is this the new reserve list? I mean, people try to do this with a Therese Nilsson art because she's, you know, on the, or other artists they're basing on the ban list now, so they'll not, Wizards will never use their art again, thinking those will go up. Those spiked up, fell flat. There's just not a real collectible market for that. This is a utility driven game that has elements of collectability in it, and for people thinking this is going to be something that is going to last the test of time just because it's got a great IP attached to it, I do not share the same sentiment. There are a bazillion Final Fantasy products out there and Marvel products out there that don't have Magic the Gathering slapped on them. They come and go. They keep pushing the envelope with them. Final Fantasy is going to keep seeing, what is it, Square Enix is going to keep trying to figure out how they can milk their own IP. So I warn everyone for having that sentiment that you know, skin-based utility or skin-based collectability is going to be the future for TCGs. Now, okay, got that out of the way as we was I looking at here with Lord of the Rings. Can I just take a second here to rant about Wizards of the Coast packaging again? What does it look like? I guess you do have, maybe this isn't the best example because it does come with this little, yeah, so you'd have to, maybe these boxes are justified because I guess this is the whole reason of buying the scene box, is you can put the cards on the back of here and make a scene out of the card, so it does make the scene out of that, and then you can frame it. So okay, maybe I'll be a little less critical of this particular product because it does justify like the packaging for it. But I mean, look at this is why this particular patron wants us to break it down. They probably want to, you know, resell the singles or whatever they're doing with these, and even this, I think, can be broken down. Now, I'm not going to go to the length of actually even breaking these down, but look at it, comes from like a case of 4 scene boxes, ends up being like 10%, at least 10% of the box to ship these. So like all of these are going to fit in just one of these cases rather than all of them. All right, so let's kind of move on here. I do have some other topics I want to talk about because I know Rudy kind of did release a banger of a video. Now, Rudy and I, Alpha Investments, we don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. I think he flip-flops around quite a bit with, you know, going from hype to basically preaching temperance. And I think he's in one of that modes because, you know, now is not the time to hype if you've got so many competitors and this distribution is going away from the distribution model you took advantage of. However, I do think that Rudy did put out a great video that was kind of echoing what I said about play boosters, that Wizards of the Coast, it's very troubling that they, in the first time in years, have decided not to keep play booster available. That was kind of the promise with Wizards of the Coast after, I believe it was New Phyrexia. We had the New Phyrexia debacle, yeah, like 15 years ago, where for the first time, stores did not have play boosters to run events. And it was during New Phyrexia. It wasn't during like the set that came after it. Like stores could not draft the latest set because there was no product distribution level. And that's when Wizards of the Coast came out with their kind of their 2.0 policy. I don't know if what Rudy calls it, like Silver Age Magic or whatever. So it's kind of started with the next set after Return to Ravnica, which is what, Guilds of Ravnica? Isn't that the one, or am I thinking Gatecrash? So like Gatecrash Return to Ravnica had a new reprint policy that whenever there was demand for the boosters, whenever distribution was out, Wizards of the Coast would guarantee that distributors had the ability to order boxes. So whenever there was any sort of low supply, they would do a print for the 2 years that it was in standard, so that they wouldn't have this debacle of standard players not being able to find cards. And then we went through a period of glut, where when you come out with collector boosters, when you come out with bundles and pre-release kits, I mean, all these things did exist during that time period too, but you come out with just the glut of products, you have to be kind of choosy with where you print. And now it just makes the most sense for Wizards of the Coast to try to eke out as much value out of collector boosters so that the market actually decides to purchase them rather than these bulky play boosters. I think that's the A factor, but I think that Rudy actually did make a lot of good points, which I hadn't really thought of and now after speaking to distributors, I think there is some truth to it. So first of all, let's address Pokemon. So the accusation that Rudy put forward with Pokemon is choosing to go the Costco route because distributors are not playing ball. And I think I need to kind of go into this more detail in a future video because there's a lot to discuss here. The whole entire ecosystem or distribution of TCGs is completely toxic now on every level. So first of all, stores aren't loyal to distributors. Because why should they? Just when they get cut and there's no, clear communication when money talks and, the store's trying to run events and trying to do things the right way, get punished, then why should you be loyal to distributors? Like when we originally signed contracts with Wizards of the Coast to start this store when we want to be on the WPN Play Network, it is very clear that we are not allowed to buy Magic the Gathering that is in print. So that remember that 2-year window I'm talking about? That is in print. We are not allowed. We are not supposed to buy and resell from any other area than distribution until it rotates out of its print run. So that even includes purchasing things on eBay, purchasing things from other stores, or even purchasing sealed product from players, for example. We are not supposed to sell sealed product from any other outlet than distribution. It was trying to keep those relationships intact. The stores, this is the chain you went through for the WPN. The WPN sold to distributors sold to stores, and then stores basically de-sealed the product and sold it to players. And that was kind of the ecosystem. Well, of course, in this day and age with where Magic the Gathering also took off and where, if stores try to even sell close sometimes to like MSRP, then it would just get scalped and we have all the scalpers and the resellers. They would just buy out all the local game stores. And I think at that point too, like Wizards of the Coast and distributors got kind of jealous, so the secondary market was making so much, and Wizards of the Coast started cutting out distributors going to direct to consumer, and I think that's the point where distributors stopped being loyal to Wizards of the Coast and said, to hell with this, we're not just going to sell to stores. All these rip and shippers have big bucks, they're willing to pay more, they have the money available. It's a lot easier to go through these guys than it is for mom and pop stores that are notorious for being late on bills. And this is not coming from how I run my operation, but after talking to distributors, holy cow, store owners are terrible with like expectations and payments and stuff with distributors. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't get claimed, doesn't get paid for. Distributors are constantly hunting people down. It's a mess, and I feel for distributors in that aspect, especially when they work on such small margins, because again, a lot of people get into this field. They try to basically fly before they even learn how to get their feet wet, and it leads to people taking on too much overhead, too many employees, misjudging their own markets in their areas, which inevitably leads to bankruptcy and collapse, and then distributors get stuck with stuff. Anyway, that's another story again for another day. But anyway, I think that distributors also, so now they're saying, okay, well, stores aren't loyal to us, Wizards not loyal to us, let's start just selling to wherever we can. And that's when we saw the era of what I say distributors masquerading as stores. I still think a lot of the big names that you'll see on TCG Player and eBay are actually basically distributors, or have really big ins with like the owners of particular distribution where they can get tens of thousands of collector boosters and things like that, because the numbers are still crazy for whenever you go on to TCG Player release when a particular seller has like 2,000 collectors. That's insane levels. Like there's no store legit brick and mortar that has any sort of demand for that amount of product. And so at that point, and of course too, if they did, why would they sell it on TCG Player and get hit with 10 to 15% fees? It just means that's just ridiculous at that point. So anyway, we went through that whole era, and so like the whole, basically the no one is loyal anymore on the distribution kind of ecosystem that we used to have in place, and that really starts with the manufacturer. And I'm not even going to give Pokemon a pass here, but Rudy kind of points out that it makes sense for Wizards of the Coast because they probably have better deals with Amazon. They probably have this, and I think his margins with distributors is way off. I think distributors actually take home a bigger chunk than his small margins of like making the example of selling to a play booster to distributors for 110 and then the distributor sells it for 120. I know the margins are slim, they're not that razor slim through distribution to stores. And when you're buying things at a massive wholesale price, you do get steep discounts from Wizards of the Coast, what these distributors of course are all at that level. So if they go through direct to Amazon, it does make sense. Would you rather send 18 semi-trucks to one location, and just do one transaction with one big name company, then try to even work with like the 4 or 5 distributors, and then try to police those distributors to make sure that they're doing their due diligence, And then when you see, like what I think with Wizards of the Coast, and they saw that, you know, just they're not stupid. They see the distributors masquerading as stores and breaking off that kind of chain of command. And they might as well just basically say, well, screw it. We'll go to Amazon. We'll make the lion's share of this transaction and let basically Amazon be the distributor. And they don't have to deal with all the, you know, the headaches of that stuff. So I think, you know, the problem is, though, after talking to distributors too, like this entire industry is just is full of foolery, of lies, cheats, deceits, because it was right when the collapse of Magic last time, the distributors all banded together and they basically gave Wizards of the Coast an ultimatum. They sat them down and said, okay, these Amazon dumps can't happen anymore. You can't keep sticking us with product and then forcing us to stick stores with product or basically lose money to sell now stores at a you know, a massive discount. And sometimes it's Wizards of the Coast that does offer those discounts. I mean, it isn't necessarily that distributors are taking a loss on product. Oftentimes Wizards of the Coast allows distributors to buy kind of dead product at a cheaper rate that then they can then pass on those sales, or they do. Usually the last time around they try to do these little events. If you remember those like Halloween events they did with Innistrad and allowed stores, they like gave stores a collector booster and then had distributors discount stores so that stores would be incentivized to, you know, draft the two Innistrad sets during Halloween, like it was like 2 years after the release of that. Anyway, so Wizards of the Coast does do some things like that. However, there was a time period when all distributors did have a kind of a sit-down Wizard to tell them to knock it off. And that's when the print loans were tightened up. That's when especially the collector boosters were tightened up and things got better for a while. But then if you look at like Wizards' side, if you see that the behavior by distributors doesn't change, or like I said, now that we have a hot market and distributors start... I don't know the terms that they have with Wizards of the Coast, if they're supposed to be selling within some sort of parameter, if there's some sort of like window of play boosters being sold for no more than 120, no less than 103 or something like that. I don't know exactly the terms they have. And then they see distributors hear from store after store after store that no, distributors are selling, you know, play boosters when they're hot for 140 or 150 or 170, and they're not getting the allocations promised from their WPN numbers, then I can see how Wizards of the Coast can then go, okay, well, if they're not... But again, it's funny because I think, you know, the buck still, in my opinion, stops with the manufacturer. I think that Wizards of the Coast is the one that should be doing more of the due diligence, to be policing the fake stores, to policing the distributors that start to veer away from their contracts. But overall, it starts with them. They need to stay true to their own contracts, and they need the one to be kind of setting the bar and setting the precedent and the example for other people to follow suit. Now, going on to Pokemon, it was very interesting that where Rudy talks about how Pokemon is cutting out distributors in favor of Costco, and he thinks it's because of bad behaviors from distributors doing this exact same thing now that Pokemon's hot, that they're holding everything back and selling at a higher price. Now, I can kind of see that happening because we were actually, like stores, and I'm not the only one I've heard, Pokemon actually reached out to us and asked us how many boxes we were getting from the distributor we chose as our kind of Pokemon Play Network. What was the overall sentiment? Were we, and they actually, there was like a big communication with stores, and I do think that they came to the conclusion that, yeah, this was not, their supply chain was not going the route that they expected it to go. And now, again, I don't think the solution is to be like, okay, let's, you know, set everyone on fire and go the Costco route and go this whole route where I know why they do. Again, it's the same thing. Big box stores it's so easy to go through that network because Costco's it's incredibly more or cost efficient to send pallets upon pallets upon pallets to Costco that they can just throw an island in their big warehouse that will sell it within days. And I mean, they used to have to do like a little bit of a sale for these things, and now they don't. They can even do a big upcharge. I remember, didn't they do like some sort of Blooming Waters for like $80 or something when the original price was way cheaper than that, and they sold out in Costco within minutes. But anyway, so I can see that Pokemon could be like, okay, we're gonna spank the distributors if they're not gonna play ball. But again, it's still, this is all things that I think this entire network needs to be worked out, where people need to start acting like adults. All of the manufacturers, the distributors, the stores, and everyone needs to sit down and see if we can get the supply chain back in order so we don't go through this rubber banding of things being thrown on Amazon and people not knowing where to get product, whether this is going to go to local game stores. Like we said, like Wizards of the Coast wants to have their cake and eat it too. They want to fill stores with their promotional products like Commander decks to try to get people hooked on the game, but then not give them the stuff that actually makes the margins, like their play boosters should be kind of the product that should sell the most. It should be like Pokemon booster boxes, and it seems like collector boosters, and instead go the route of like Amazon and those. So again, they want us to front all the work and not give stores a reward for it. But anyway, I can talk and talk and talk about until I'm blue in the face about how, you know, this entire industry is just so backwards with a lot of things, and it makes me shake my head because I'll get people in the comment section be saying like, you know, oh, capitalism, blah blah blah. But you can actually go and look at any industry right now. Like I always bring up like the tire stores or you know, like AutoZone. You don't see a lot of those manufacturers that do car components go through drop shipping on Amazon or going through like Amazon dumps and blowouts. They know, they've been in this industry long enough to know that you need strategic locations, strategic partners, and you need like a sales force to get your product name out there. That occasionally you can go that route of like putting a product on something like, you know, Amazon or like things like Walmart.com, but it usually takes like an additional step. It isn't like the first route of where they decide to, you know, throw stuff. And you can look at basically any industry that exists still today on main streets and just any sort of commerce. They typically do have a mutual understanding that these things, these brick and mortars or this chain is actually beneficial in the long run to the kind of survival of the brand. So, you know, it is still frustrating, and we're back in this era where you'd think that Wizards of the Coast would learn from their last Amazon dump and kind of cutting out the LGS or the distributor, how this backfires in the long run. So if you haven't checked out Rudy's video, I actually do encourage you to go watch it because, as I stated, we don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but I think you put some great points. And I'm actually really happy to see the change of tone in Rudy, where he's actually, you know, he's starting to even say the term utility without it being a derogatory term. Like I still think that, you know, that was kind of originated through channels like mine that are definitely more player focused. My entire shtick here was about playing the game. I came from a background of playing the game. I started a store with the intention of playing the game, and all of my channels have still been basically funneling towards why the game is it's a game. It's meant to be played, and the ecosystem should be focused on a game-centric aspect rather than the collectible, you know, kind of centric thing. So anyway, I've kind of rambled. Lastly, I'm just going to touch on kind of the Gundam debacle. I think that video was the most disliked video in a long time. I had a lot of stores that were very upset with my stance that I had on Gundam. So I'll clarify some things with what I like about Bandai. So everything that I've stated so far with Pokemon and with Magic, I'm not seeing the same behavior with Bandai. So you can have your complaints about Bandai. I know some stores like we signed up, we went through all the paperwork, we jumped through hoops, distributors promised us product, and then when it came time for Gundam to be released, we didn't get anything. Now, after speaking with distributors, my numbers were incredibly low too. After talking to distributors and kind of getting the overall story, Gundam was not anticipated to be this hot. So when Bandai moves at just the most sluggish pace. You have to do pre-orders like 4, 5, 6 months in advance for things. By the time that they change your numbers, you know, markets can change. Like in the TCG world, 6 months is a lifetime where a market can go from hot to cold and back. And so expecting to be working on like a 6-month window is something that Bandai definitely needs to shore up. They need to have a quicker turnaround, quicker communication, and they need to be able to gauge their markets a lot better. So there is criticism for Bandai. But what I've gauged from talking to distributors is that Gundam had way more demand than they expected. And I'm going to reiterate here, I'm going to kind of push back on some of these people that have commented and some of these stores. How much One Piece did you run before you requested thousands of boxes of Gundam? That's kind of like I want people to kind of look in the mirror. If you're a new store, yes, it sucks to be a new store. We've all gone through the stores where distributors don't want to call back, or manufacturers don't want to allocate you anything. I get it. Even if you are in a robust location, you're just on fire with other stuff. There is a lot of hesitance from manufacturing distributors to really want to allocate a lot of things to unknowns. And that's what it was with Gundam. Gundam had a reception that I don't think Bandai was prepared for. I think that they were looking at more on the lines of Digimon numbers and more on the lines of their Union Arena than they were of really trying to compare Gundam to One Piece. Now, was that a miss by Bandai? Absolutely. There is enough product right now to satisfy the market. Unfortunately, though, what happens in especially this hot market is there are a lot of missing signals and just flat out lies of the market, where when speculation takes over, it is just the big liar in the room of where when product, especially what would have happened with Gundam, if there was an excess amount of product in a hot market, people would have just bought it all up. Speculators would have just bought it up. Fake stores would have bought it all up. And there would have been a lot of market manipulation based upon just the fact that we're in a hot market where people can make a buck. So the stores wanting to run events would still have the problem of not having supply. And what could have easily happened too is if there wasn't that demand to actually eat up the supply of the speculative market, the fastest way to kill a new game is glut. It's actually not scarcity, it's glut. When there's too much stuff on the market that does not actually meet the demand, it leaves a bad taste in everyone's mouth. So in this market, at least some people can make money. The stores that were running One Piece, the stores that did get product, they're feeling good about Gundam. They're feeling good that they got numbers. They're feeling good that Bandai prioritize stores that were running events. They felt good that they don't wake up the next day and see a Gundam drop on Amazon for like less than they paid for, or like, like what you're not seeing right now, you're not all of a sudden seeing it available and be like, well, why didn't I get any? And there's thousands of boxes on this soulless TCG player that it obviously doesn't have a store. That's the whole thing. Some of these go research some of these TCG player accounts and try to actually find physical locations for some of these stores that have thousands upon thousands of boxes, up for even things like Star Wars Unlimited and Lorcon, which are two other manufacturers are supposed to be, really vetting stores at this point. So it's like, I would rather have a company that erred on the side of caution and wanted to really, again, dip their toes to see if there was a market for this game, than really going hard and then, just like trying to replicate, oh, we sell this many One Piece, might as well do the same for Gundam. So, and from what I've heard from like Bandai, is they are trying to address this. I do think that there will be a new type wave of more boxes coming in the future. Yes, it sucks right now, especially when there is a hot market momentum, but you got to remember that this market is such a tightrope to walk, where the fastest way to kill a game is not scarcity. The fastest way to kill a game is glut. And we saw it happen with My Hero Academia when the speculators ruined that game. It wasn't really universes that ruined that game, it was speculators. The same thing can be really even said for MetaZoo. I don't think that MetaZoo ever had legs, but it did have a community that people did enjoy the game. And it was the speculators that absolutely trashed it, that completely gave a missignal to the market, created overprinting, created a glut of products. And when the dust settled, there was not nearly the amount of people playing the game and actually cultivating the game that needed to be there to actually sustain that amount of product. So I'd way rather have Bandai go down this route of looking at people that have run. And the thing is, we barely ran One Piece. And we've been doing it for like a year or less of really carrying products. And again, I don't want to like toot my own horn and be like, well, haha, you guys didn't get any product. I did. But again, I'd really like to know, were you guys running One Piece? Were you communicating, doing surveys with Bandai when they actually release, because they do like, quarterly surveys and ask exactly like what your needs are as a store. How much money are you doing with distributors with other games? Like all of these factors probably played in the fact of, what stores. Like I was quite disappointed myself too about Gundam, because we didn't get enough booster boxes to run events either. We got plenty of pre-release kit or plenty of starter kits, and we were kind of short on the miniature starter kits for sure, based on the demand that was there. But we did get like enough product to satisfy the needs of our community and some, and be able to at least like this is night and day from other drops of games that have come and gone, where it's like, damn, we were overloaded with this crap and expected to buy all this crap when the market's not moving. Whereas now, like I feel very satisfied with what I was able to get with Gundam. Of course, I still have a billion people that would order from me on Patreon. I didn't, very, very few patrons got in Gundam. It was all eaten up mostly locally, so it went to the people that have been, with me for a long time. However, again, I'd rather have this scenario than the latter scenario, where it's just like a dumpster fire of product and, a company just, again, shoving things down our throats without really doing their due diligence that this thing has legs. So, yeah, another long video, a lot of stuff here, and I'm open to criticism. I'm open to changing my point of view. I have heard people that said, we tried with Gundam, Kevin, you're wrong, 200 booster boxes is unacceptable. And yeah, looking back at my video, I definitely did miss the ball on that. That there are mistakes, there are growing pains, but if you do look at the history of Bandai, you can't blame them for being a little bit hesitant by going all in on another game that is unproven, that they don't know the market's there. They are a company in my opinion, that's doing everything right by trying to gauge the market, by trying to interact with the community, by trying to talk to stores and distributors and trying to kind of feel it out rather than just dump things on Amazon and hope for the best. So I'm gonna have to do a barometer update again. I did a video not too long ago about showing which games that I have faith in, which games I think are just knocking out of the park, and kind of look at those metrics again based upon supply, demand, how much communications with stores and distributors, how many the secondary market cards are being absorbed, like people actually playing the game. And if you go back to my talk about Gundam's amazing. Most cards that are playable have over 1,000 cards sold in a game with short supply and supposedly no tournaments being run. That is huge. And so I would be a little empathetic for the position Bandai's in, and you know, kind of give them some slack with Gundam. We'll wait and see. Again, I will change my tone if they just completely bungle the second set. If they overprint or underprint, yeah, I'll definitely be hard and critical on them as well. But so far, I'm still, if I were to rate the company that's doing the best right now in this market, which is a very, very, very tough market to navigate, it would be Bandai, especially with One Piece. And Gundam, I think so far so good. Union Arena, we don't carry it. I don't dabble in it. I don't really have any demand for it. I don't know any people out demand. I occasionally do Digimon. But again, Digimon seems to have pre-orders get fulfilled if I pre-order them. Yeah. I think they're doing their apps they're actually improving their app, which is actually good. You know, they haven't copyrighted strike the fan-made way to play One Piece online. Like, again, I think Lorcon is dead in the water. I think that after Pixelborn, I would not touch this crap. Like, you know, I'm still pre-ordering Lorcana for people. I saw people in my area. There's a couple people that just want to collect one of every set and stuff, so we'll get product for them. But the decisions Lorcana has made in the not-so-recent past have just been abysmal with their kind of tone-deaf reception of the community. They keep bouncing back and forth of how they're going to supply. Now they're really tightening their belt again. Like, now they're actually making it a little too tough for stores to get product. So making us reapply 7 times for everything because they change systems every week of how they're going to do it. So anyway, again, maybe this company will get their act together, but I don't know. Lorcana is just a mess right now of not knowing what they want to be, whether they want to actually be a TCG or a CCG, or they want to really bank on the Disney collectibility, if they actually want to be a legit game that's run properly. So, and then again, Star Wars Unlimited. Star Wars Unlimited is another thing that I'll have to visit on the barometer, because there's a lot of decisions by that company too that I'm not the biggest fan of. And both of these, like, the thing that I always like to reiterate, like, people have their complaints, like some of the comments about the failed games of Bandai, and I don't know if it's really Bandai's fault or if it's just the games were failures, like with like Battle Spirits and some other things they've had in the past. But as far as like Star Wars Unlimited and Lorcana, I think that their biggest problems are the companies behind them. Like both Fantasy Flights and Ravensburg are notorious for being game killers, you know, for really running with hype and making the most, you know, short-sighted decisions ever with their games. And so hopefully they can get their act together too, because again, I'm not really impressed with Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited with the rotations. Man, that's quick with rotations, and I really think they should cultivate this really big, vibrant scene before even worrying about rotations. And I've heard the same thing about One Piece with rotations. I'm actually against the One Piece rotation, because I think that One Piece is one of those games that you kind of have to be like Flesh and Blood, where you just retire characters and retire specific what we call like hero-based spells. Like, they need to do a better job. I know that in One Piece there's a lot of complaints about some of these cards that can just go in any deck, where they should have just been like Big Mom specific. That way, like, a bunch of Luffy ramp decks can't abuse them, because they could only go in like Big Mom that doesn't have a ramp style. Anyway, if you don't know One Piece, you know what I'm talking about. But they have a rotation coming up too, which the first 4 sets will rotate in something like April 2026. So it is still a ways off before rotation occurs. There'll be plenty of other sets that are out at that time. But I actually don't think the One Piece needs rotation. I think they can just kind of keep their the way they do things right now, with like kind of retiring characters or banning specific cards that are associated with just one deck, and it just kind of tones them down. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. I've really rambled on this one. Chloe is bored out of her mind. She's like, shut up and get to work. Shut up and get to work so I can get my walkie walk. Because if I don't get my walkie walk, I am going to be a very angry dog. Is that right, Chloe? You run the store? Anyway, Kevin with Gonro Games. Appreciate being around for this long rambling video. Thanks for watching.